very specific lactobacillus and bifidus strains. For instance, will have one function. One will help with IBS, one will help with colic, one will help with vaginitis, one, like that. And that's it. And if you don't have those specific strains, whatever great probiotic with a list of 150 stuff is going to do nothing. And so that's the retraining that has to happen. And they're taking advantage of the public. Have you noticed? We're adding probiotics to protein powders and kombucha and drinks, and we're gonna, jack up the price because of all these benefits for your gut you're gonna get. Wrong. Zero benefit unless it's very specific strains, and you're gonna know they're the right strains because they're gonna be real expensive. Okay, that's the story on the probiotics. And the other way they take advantage of you, the best probiotics are the ones that are refrigerated, because you want to keep them longer, keep them alive longer, so you can kill them faster in your stomach, right? So let's charge double. I mean, it's such a game.
Is that the same with prebiotics?
No, So a prebiotic is a fiber that just feeds your probiotic, and you don't digest it. So they're oligosaccharides, and they're important to feed keystone strains in your gut. And again, it goes back to your mom. Your mom gave you all the bacteria you need, but if there were certain environmental conditions, they're going to suppress the good guys, and the bad guys can overgrow. They're still there, but they just can't really, get off the ground. So if you take the right prebiotics, then they can feed those keystone strains, and then they can outpopulate the bad guys. So for instance, the big disadvantage that you'll have, say with autistic kids or kids, they're all, whether you're born by C-section, what's happening is, a C-section baby is going to have the inoculation from the hospital. So they're going to have all those primary bugs, very, very little from the mother herself. So the overgrowth is going to be primarily strep, staph, and C. diff. And, so you can help by, what keystone strains are there, getting the prebiotics so that they can start increasing in number to outgrow the pathogens. So what the spores do, though, you want to get them back in there because they're smarter than we are. They know which bugs to go after and which bugs to help. We're kind of playing this game as, that we know. You'll go to some practitioners with long protocols that will say, we're going to do killing agents, and we're going to wipe out this, and we're going to kill this parasite, or we're going to, but the truth is, even H. pylori has a role. We don't want to wipe out any particular organism. It's about balance. And who knows balance better but, an organism itself. So, and the spores are very good at that, in forming the balance that you need in your microbiome. So that's what, we've been teaching doctors the last 3 years in, how the microbiome is supposed to work, how to keep it in balance, how to keep things like SIBO and C. diff and candidiasis and IBS, all those things that are on a, skyrocketing right now, in balance. So that, I think, kind of covered the GMO.
So what do you mean by spores? Do you mean like microorganisms?
Yes. Okay. So Bacillus bacteria have a stage of development, a stage in their life cycle called a spore state. It's an endospore. Think of it like a spaceship. Okay, so it's a protective layer. And they're smart enough that if they are in an unfavorable environment, they protect themselves and they kind of go, it's like a transformer, they go into this little hibernation. And then when they're swallowed in their food, they're going, and they get into our gut, and that's their favorite environment. So they sense it. Very interesting. Quorum sensing, a chemical surveillance system. Even then when they're hibernating, they know what's around them.
Wow.
They know what other organisms are around them and how many and what species. So they say, oh, this is Hawaii for us. We're gonna come out, but we see there's a bad guy here. So when we come up, we're gonna come out locked and loaded with a customized antibiotic and knock him out of the park. And boom, and then they're colonized and they're all happy. So that's why I say they're smarter than we are because they've got this form sensing and ability to balance the gut.
So where are like the spores would be? So I'm trying to understand. So they would be like the babies of bacteria, healthy bacteria, or
Okay, so the spore
Cultures?
form is just a phase that they go into. So they colonize. Say then if they're colonizing and you take an antibiotic, they'll go back into the spore form. Wait for the antibiotic to
so
go
that's
away.
how your body
wow.
can heal itself after an
Wow.
antibiotic.
Yes.
Okay, I've read about that.
Yes.
Wow,
Exactly.
cool.
So they protect themselves. That's why you can take these when you take antibiotics. Not that we think you should take antibiotics. There's a lot of alternative things, but
And by these you mean what? Like, is it fermented food?
No,
Is
it's
it-
called Megaspore Biotic.
yeah.
It's
Megaspore biotic,
I'll
which
go
is-
over all that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He's going to talk about the specifics. I'm giving the big picture here.
So, like,
So,
where would we find them in nature? Just like
they are
dirt?
the soil is their vector.
Go eat
So they are in the spore form in the soil until an animal or an insect or a human comes around and eats them. And then they thrive in the microbiomes of, animals, humans, or insects.
What we eat. So
Right.
we, by nature, we would get them through just our regular diet if we had
Yes.
healthy soil.
Yes.
Okay.
And, when people used to play in the dirt and garden and eat dirt and all those good things we, should do.
But they get rid of with the antibiotic soaps.
Yes, that
it. Yeah,
Or
antibiotics.
what
And
you
your
say on the floor.
sanitizers.
Yes, and that's, and it's, if we look at what we've done in our environment to stop the cycle of developing a good, healthy immune system, living in this, sanitized culture has not helped. So, because that is how we train our immune system. People, it's kind of like cholesterol. You need to have no cholesterol because it's bad. Well, cholesterol makes your hormones. I don't think that's a good idea.
And your
to knock it out.
brain.
So it's the same with germs. Germs are so bad, no germs. But
You need germs to build the immune system.
yes, you have to look at it like this. We have a police force. What would our police force be like if there was never any crime?
Poor.
Would they forget how to shoot their gun? Or would they, be lazy?
Donuts
So
up,
the
yeah, donuts.
pathogens are a way of just keeping our immune system active and sharp and on the ball. We don't want the criminals overrunning our immune system. We don't want to let open all the prison doors. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there's a place for them just to keep things sharp, and that's why it's about a balance. Okay. So
what about when you make your own heaters?
Good question. Fermented food. Fermented food is all good because those bacteria create metabolites that when you ingest them, they help you balance your pH, they've got vitamins, there's nutrition in that. Are you taking active culture in yogurt and kefir and repopulating your gut bacteria? No. So when you buy active culture and you're paying extra for active culture, it's not doing anything for your gut bacteria. But the fermentation part of it, the metabolites in the yogurt itself, that's a good thing. It's still about you want to be alkaline, you want to eat healthy, and fermented foods is all great for that. But it's not reseeding your microbiome. Good questions.
No, what about raw yogurt?
Pardon?
What about raw yogurt?
Like, same thing. It's great. It's better than, I think, it's better than, the pasteurized, commercialized stuff. But, it's not going to reseed your microbiome.
So the only way to refeed your microbiome is to eat dirt.
So when you give your kid
I
the
mean, like
cracker,
different ways,
have them
but
go roll it in the dirt.
different ways to the dirt. But
Roll it on the
like
floor.
to keep the fermented foods, don't do it. And
We're saying if we
probiotics don't do it.
the issue, the fastest way is to take these documented spore products. Now,
Yeah.
I'll tell you a little bit, they're not new. Europe's spore products as pharmaceutical drugs for 60 years. There's more science on spores than anything, but it's very interesting. The U.S. doesn't have any of these.
Because we're advanced.
We're trying to get rid of all this stuff. Take more of that soap and sanitizer.
Exactly.
Because we're involved in
So-
war.
We might get sick if we take them.
Exactly. So what this company did was just take all of these products that were pharmaceutical drugs that were doing all these great things and put them all together in a nutraceutical product that doctors can provide for their patients without a prescription. So it's functional medicine type of doctors that are being educated about this to help with all the gut issues, which are the foundation to all the health problems.
Sorry, not to be dense, but to go back. So when you're born, that's when your microbiome is seeded.
Yes.
And then you can't really change it from that point on?
You can
Oh.
alter it. You can, if you took an antibiotic,
Yeah.
it's going to wipe out your bacteria and preferentially let the C. diff, the strep, and the staph come back.
Okay, but what you're talking about, the other things are gonna block up and they'll slowly
The
open back
spores.
up. The spores
The
will
spores.
will
yeah.
lock up and they'll open up
Yes.
eventually.
Yes. And that's if
But that's still all your original microbiome.
well, the spores aren't original and they're transient.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
So they have a 24-day life cycle.
Oh, that's
and they're-
right.
Yeah. So they go through and they clean things up. But of course, eating better is going to preferentially help your good gut bacteria. And that's going to help keep the pathogens in check. And if in a perfect world, if you were eating organic and managed our stress and slept well and were nice to each other, that type of stuff, then we wouldn't have such problems with our microbiome. That's not the world we live in.
So you're saying it wipes out our natural bacteria that we cannot get back. But I think
No.
where you're missing, what she's not getting is that there's it's wiping out the bigger population of
Yes.
it, but it's still there because
Yes.
you've got this very convoluted stomach system. And they're in there, they're in those little pockets. They just got to reestablish.
Yes, it wipes it out, but in the appendix, there's the seed.
It's saved.
There's also, they do come back, but they come back at a different proportion. And it's different for different people depending on how much gut damage you had before you took the antibiotic. For some people, it'll come back in 10 days. Some people 2 months. Some people never.
Like in the case of a baby, basically I got to have him naturally, but afterwards I had to have antibiotics, or they gave me antibiotics, and it was traumatic, so I kind of said yes.
Yeah. I
But
mean, they're
so
supposed
then,
to save your
nursing him, he had antibiotics right away, so it's like, bummer, I had worked so hard on my microbiome, and I was like, it was just wiped out.
He had antibiotics 30 minutes after he was born
Pardon?
in his eyes.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I did, we don't do that one.
life. Oh,
Oh, we didn't do that one. Okay.
So no, we didn't do any, anything for him. It's just they gave me antibiotics because there were complications. But so then nursing, that went into my milk. So then I'm like, what? I mean, is there? Yeah,
Well,
what
that's
can you do?
yes, and that's what we would say.
Yeah.
We have a total gut restoration.
Uh,
Part of that is you would start the spores. The spores give us a good idea of how much damage and dysbiosis by how well you tolerate it. That
okay.
helps us design a protocol for you. And then we have, for people with very severe gut damage, what happens is you have mucin layers in your gut. And as the holes are being poked in your gut, those mucin layers aren't protecting you. So there's ways to build back the mucin layers. There's ways to feed those keystone strains to help them outpopulate the bad guys. There's more natural ways to deal with candida instead of heavy antifungals that hurt your liver. So and this is what we teach the doctors so that they can better help that establish the microbiome naturally and get it back functioning. Okay, so I will turn it over to Ken. Some things for you to research. Jeff Smith with the Responsible Technology Institute. He studied GMOs and glyphosate. Oh, I forgot part of my story. There was, with all this going on, I heard a radio advertisement. There was a doc in before Pheno that was going to talk about GMOs. And I thought, yes, because we know that the extension agent and the USDA and the co-op and the University of Idaho, because it's a land grant university, has this spiel, and it's telling farmers that Roundup is safe, right? So I thought, okay, there's going to be a counter to this. So I go to this lecture, and he's talking about the benefits of GMOs.
Oh my
He's
goodness.
saying what an advantage, that you can have apples on your table for months on end. And
Oh
they
my
grow.
gosh.
What an advantage to have potatoes in your pantry and they don't mold.
Eternal
And by
potatoes.
the way, Butch Otto is married to J.R. Simplot's daughter, and isn't it great that he gets so many preferential treatment to Simplot, and that they're coming out with 3 new recombinant potatoes next year. Wow. And so I was freaking out, thinking, I can't believe I'm in America. This bubble that's happened in Idaho. And then he put a trough. And Roundup is so safe, you can coat your tongue with it.
Go for it.
So
Go for it. Show us.
Demonstrate.
Yes.
I have to go to work, but thank you very much. Oh, you're welcome. I'm sorry I'm gonna miss the other stuff.
Well, we'll try to get it recorded for you.
Great, that'd be great. Bye.
So, again, I was raised in Idaho. It was my paradise. I'm sick to see what's happened to it, and I just want people to wake up. I hope that there will be practitioners that will want to take, the mantle and get on board with restoring the gut. I hope there's activists here that want to get the information and go toe to toe, in a grassroots effort to stop the madness. So.
Thank you. That was great. That was really good.
Doesn't get wrapped up at all. We just got back from a 3-day symposium up in California, put on by Microbiome Labs, and there were 12 docs and researchers talking about all these subjects that Tracy just covered, and in all kind of graphs and charts and scientific findings and research studies and everything from why they use certain species of spores in these spore-based bodies, and how they do the total gut restoration program, and why they use a particular type of oligosaccharide and a galactosaccharide or whatever, all that kind of in-depth science, to where when we were flying out yesterday, we're like, oh, my brain is bruised. There's just so much stuff coming at us. But, I say, Tracy gets fired up, and to be able to get this information out to everybody, and then they can tell everybody, and get them, the links, like you're talking about Jeff Smith's stuff. He's on YouTube, all kind of places. A lot of times he'll start out like a semi-darkened room with a garage door at his back, and you go, I'm coming to you today from an undisclosed location. Because he's talking about GMOs in Monsanto or something like that, right? And so he doesn't want to get hunted down and arcacided. But y'all know what an arcicide is, right?
No.
That's people get crossways with the Clintons. That's arcicide.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what we've started doing in practice is putting all this science to work. And so Microbiome Labs, they first started with the Megaspore Biotic 4 or 5 years ago, making it available to practitioners and educating. And so this is 5 species of bacillus in spore form. And they had to do this, in capsules. They had to be able to prove that these things were 100% in spore form and that they would stay in spore form in these capsules, because they're smart. They don't come out of spore form until they're in an environment that they know where they're going to thrive. And sorry about my throat. It's talked all weekend too. And but anyway, so we started learning how to do these protocols. And when you have someone whose gut is really upset, like you were talking about after you had the antibiotics after your baby was born and stuff. So, some of your good gut floras and stuff, they got out of balance. Not in particularly one thing that's totally wiped out, or you just lose the balance. and that changes the pH of the environment in the gut from the stomach on out to the colon. There's different sections of the intestines, and they all have a different pH, and different kinds of organisms live there. And based on the pH and the things they produce, they control your immune system. What Tracy was saying, they make 90% of your neurotransmitters, like serotonin. You think about serotonin and what it does. Serotonin comes from tryptophan, which you get when you eat turkey, like you get sleepy after a turkey dinner. So your gut bugs turn it into 5-hydroxytryptophan, which becomes serotonin, which becomes melatonin. You all know what melatonin does? Makes you sleepy, right? Well, it does a few other things too, but serotonin is also your happy neurotransmitter, or calming. It's an antidepressant neurotransmitter. When someone is given Prozac because they are told they're depressed, that is to raise serotonin levels in the brain by blocking the serotonin receptors, so that serotonin builds up in suspension between the neurons. So nobody's really Prozac deficient. You're serotonin deficient. So if you go back and you fix the gut where serotonin is produced and that rebalances, you don't need Prozac. Last year in September, Tracy and I attended the Integrative Medicine for Mental Health Conference in Dallas. 1,500 psychiatrists and therapists.
Wow.
I had to think psychoanalysts and all that stuff. So these folks are mesmerized by the information they were getting in there, how they could learn to not give their patients and clients medications, but to fix the actual cause of their problem. And it would separate into 2 rooms and different things that they were doing. But it was just amazing, sitting there listening to these guys with amazed looks on their faces, like, I've never heard this before. And it's just, it was excellent for us. We're just like, wow, who expected to see this? And Dr. Laura Block, who was the doctor, the pediatrician that Tracy was talking about that treated her son and wrote that book, was at that and was presenting and handing out the same book here 20 years later, still doing it.
30.
30. Shh. We're only 39. So, but anyway, so, going back, to the gut and that environment and getting that reset and retrained even. These 5 strains of spores or bacillus in spore form, once they get through the stomach acids and the digestive enzymes and the bile salts, they get in there in this nice warm environment, and they're like, this is what, like Tracy said, was Hawaii for them. They come out of spore form and they put down roots, and they know who's around them, who's supposed to be there and who's not, and they start producing their own little chemical bombs to rebalance the microbiome. And she's talking about keystone strains. Y'all have heard of E. coli, right? People get E. coli problems sometimes from food contamination. But there's Akkermansia, Providentia, and Ficobacterium, and Pseudomonas, and all these things that live in the gut normally at certain levels, and they each have their own certain things that they do. But when you do an anti-biotic, you're killing life, right? That's what antibiotic means. It's indiscriminate. It's not like, oh, this person has strep throat, we're going to give you this, and it's only going to kill the strep throat. No. It wipes everything, or knocks it down a lot. And so you have microbiomes all over your body. It's not just in the gut. You've got a microbiome in your mouth, and in your ear, and in your eyes, and in your brain. You have a microbiome. You have bacteria live in your brain. On your skin, that's the largest organ of the body, right? You detox out of your skin. When you see rashes showing up on somebody's skin, and eczema, psoriasis, and things like that, that's a reflection of what's happening in the gut. And so you fix the gut, that stuff goes away. And there was one of the presenters this weekend had pictures, befores and afters, and all they did was restore the gut microbiome. And I mean, some of these folks look like they've been burned. They had eczema so bad. So the Total Gut Restoration Program involves that, the Megaspore Biotic. I know it's kind of a funny name. Everything's mega with these guys. We had a clinician. I don't think he's even a clinician, was he? He was a muscle testing guy who worked for his son, who was a chiropractor. And he was bugging us. He wanted to get this stuff in. He wanted a muscle testing AK kit and these kinesiology kit and stuff. So we got down there, set up a meeting with him, and he liked it. This is testing great and all this stuff. And a couple of days later, we get an email from him. He goes, well, we're not going to use it because we don't like the color of the bottle. It tested bad. Well, red, white, and blue. I was like, He goes, what was the word he used? Something like it's repellent or repulsive or something like that. And I said, well, if we paint the southern wall down in Mexico with that, I wonder if it would work the same way. But no. He actually took it as a joke, but he was a nice guy. But it was just kind of those weird things like that. And he goes, that sounds like a Walmart brand, Mega. But you don't forget the name. Mega Sporbiotic, and then there's Mega Mucosa and Mega Prebiotic, Mega Mycobalance for killing yeast. What other megas we have?
Mega Guard.
Mega Guard's the newest one, yeah. Then he just came out with one that was coming out in November called Wheat Rescue for people with gluten problems. Yeah.
So with the standard American diet, even if you restore the gut, if people keep eating GMO foods and high fat and high sugar, is the gut going to stay
It's
restored?
going to keep damaging the gut.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So really the first thing is people need to completely
That's
change
part
their
of it.
diet.
Yeah. And that's going to be Bridget's job.
No pressure. I ain't worried.
Yeah.
I know my stuff.
She knows her stuff, that's right. So the protocol that we teach and use is called a total gut restoration. This is what we're teaching the docs. And it's become so much more than just 3 things. You're like, okay, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. Every patient is different. When I first started using Megaspore 4 years ago, in my practice down in Grapevine, the bottle says give 2 a day with supper. You always take it with a meal because it stimulates the spores. So I did this with this lady, and 3 days later she goes, Dr. Ken, he goes, what did you do to me? She had diverticulosis, and it triggered an episode of that. And because it was just too much too fast, because they actually colonize in the gut and start moving things around. And you never see that. You know, we were using, what was it, ProBiomax DF. It was 350 billion CFU per capsule. Bifidobacteriums and lactobacilluses. Supposed to be great. We never got any kind of reaction like that. We never got Herx. You know what a Herxheimer reaction is? It's a healing crisis type of reaction where you're killing something off so fast that the byproducts of that die off, your liver can't clear it, and it makes you sick. It makes you feel like you're coming down with the flu. Yeah, that's right. Yep. So, so all the things you have to consider, you know, is like with the diet, you know, how much bread and stuff like that are they getting? You know, what is their gluten exposure? I mean, that's the big thing everybody talks about is gluten all the time, but its cousin is gliadin. So these 2 things have been increased dramatically in the germ of the grains that are grown in the U.S. now through all this GMO process, genetic modifications, where they're actually splicing in to our foods viral and bacterial genes to change and to make them resistant to the Roundup. And it's not just the glyphosate that's in the Roundup, which is an antibiotic on its own, but there's surfactants and stuff in there that are even more dangerous for our gut. And like Tracy was saying, it pokes holes in there. And you start out with this thing called leaky gut. So we have to assess the patients to see, you know, how far along in this process are they? What are they manifesting with? Are they just coming in because they can't sleep? We've seen that. Is it because their blood sugar's sneaking up and they don't want to be put on insulin or something like that? They come to you and go, can you figure out what I can do because I don't want to do these medications? Cholesterol problems, arthritis, the eczema, and all these things that are autoimmune related, where your body's self-defense has been confused by the non-self things, and so it attacks itself. like Hashimoto's. Y'all heard of Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and none of those things are really easy to manage, and almost every person's different with that as well. So anyway, you're assessing each one of these people for how bad they are along that, and then trying to determine how slow you need to go to restore their guts. Where you start. And Microbiome Labs has made it easy because they have the 5-spore strain, the megaspore, but you can go all the way down to 1, the HU58 of the Bacillus subtilis strain, and start with just that. And you can open these capsules up and do a half a capsule or a quarter of a capsule. You can dump it in water, put it in applesauce for a kid. It has no flavor. It's safe for babies. You can put it in breast milk. You can tip your finger and put it in the baby's mouth. You can put it right on the nipple and let the baby get it that way. It's been used for bacterial vaginosis, just as a suppository to rebalance the microbiome of the vagina. So it has all these uses. So you can, like I said, you can start down at HU58 and get them used to that, and then you can move them up to 2 strains in what's called the Restore Flora, which is also one we use when someone's on antibiotics. So you have 2 strains of the spores in there, and you have Saccharomyces boulardii, which in a human, when you take that as a beneficial yeast, it selectively gets rid of candida. So you don't get thrush, like when you're on antibiotic. Once they get used to that or get off the antibiotic, then you can then upgrade them up to the full megaspore and gradually titrate them up to where they can do 2 a day. And they're always going to ask a question, well, then how long do I need to do that? Well, once you've been on the 2 a day dose for a couple months, then you can go back to just weekend maintenance because of that 24-day life cycle they have in your gut. And they move along to different places in your gut too, the different pH areas. They may start at one end, they may end up colonized on the other end, and then out they go.
And then, so the maintenance is just taken out on the weekends?
Yep.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you,
So
do you find that people can tolerate the 2 capsules, or is it most people can't tolerate?
starting out,
Starting out.
people we see, most people can't.
Cannot.
Yeah, because what I've found, whether Texas or up here, is the folks that have come to see me have been through a bunch of doctors. They got them a bag of drugs, and they're not getting any better. And that kind of stuff, where they don't want to be doing any kind of drugs. They want to do their healing process another way, right? Yeah. And so, that's the process we do. And we can do labs and all that kind of stuff for documentation and do that. Which, by the way, Microbiome Labs is coming out with a new GI mapping stool test that uses special testing now for the actual